You're standing on your porch, morning coffee in hand, when you notice a deer standing perfectly still at the edge of your yard. Normally, the slightest movement of your arm or the subtle click of the door latch would send it bolting into the trees, white tail flashing a warning as it vanished into the safety of the brush. But this morning, it doesn't run. It watches you with an unnerving, focused intensity, stepping closer into the mown grass instead of pulling away into the shadows. In that moment, a fundamental law of the wild, one that has kept predators and prey apart for millions of years, is quietly breaking. Something is wrong, and for reasons that science is only beginning to understand, this animal has decided that its greatest enemy is now its only hope. For as long as humans have shared this planet with other living things, there has been a map in the minds of every wild creature. Biologists call it the landscape of fear. It is a biological navigation system that marks certain areas and certain species as lethal. To a deer, a wolf is a red zone. To a seal, the shadow of a dorsal fin is a red zone. And for nearly every creature on Earth, for 50,000 years, the sight of a human being has been the most intense red zone of all. We are the super predators, the creatures that hunt from a distance, the ones whose very scent can clear a forest in seconds. But occasionally, the map glitches. In 2005, off the coast of California, a humpback whale named Valentina was found hopelessly entangled in heavy crab trap lines. Hundreds of pounds of nylon rope were digging into her flesh, pinning her pectoral fins to her body and slowly dragging her down. When a team of divers arrived, they expected a struggle. A panicked 50-ton animal is usually a death sentence for anyone nearby. But Valentina didn't thrash. She didn't dive. She stayed perfectly still, floating at the surface, and as the divers worked with knives to slice away the plastic cage, she appeared to move her body to give them better access to the ropes. It took hours of painstaking work in the freezing water. When the last line fell away, Valentina didn't just swim off. She circled each diver, nudging them gently, and then performed a spectacular series of breaches, leaping her entire body out of the water in what looked, to every human eye present, like a dance of joy. This is the first concrete payoff of our investigation, the realization that the landscape of fear can be overridden by a force even more powerful than the instinct to flee. A wild animal doesn't see a person in these moments. It sees a possibility that nature no longer provides. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the mathematics of desperation. Nature is governed by a series of cost-benefit analyses that happen in the blink of an eye. Biologists use a risk assessment model known as the fear-desperation ratio. In a healthy state, an animal's fear of a human is near 100%. The risk of approaching us is too high because we represent a potential predator. But when an animal is trapped, starving, or profoundly injured, the mortality risk of its situation begins to climb. If a dolphin has a hook through its jaw and cannot eat, its chance of death is nearly 100%. At that specific intersection of math and survival, the fear of the human predator is suddenly outweighed by the certainty of death from the environment. The animal isn't trusting you. It is surrendering to the only moving thing in its landscape that might have the agency to change the outcome. It's a biological wager. The animal is betting that even if you are a killer, you might not be a killer right now. In the silence of that backyard encounter or that mid-ocean rescue, the animal is doing something that should be impossible. It is calculating a miracle. But is it just a lucky guess, or do animals actually understand who we are and what we can do? This brings us to the fixer hypothesis. High-intelligence species like whales, elephants, and dolphins have neural architectures that are remarkably similar to ours, particularly in the areas of the brain responsible for shared intentionality. They can perceive that another being has a goal. When a wild bottlenose dolphin in Hawaii approached a diver named Keller Laros and offered its fin, it wasn't just swimming nearby. It waited while Laros removed a fishing hook and line that had wrapped around its pectoral fin. The dolphin seemed to understand a fundamental truth about humans that no other creature in the sea possesses. We have hands. To a wild animal, a human hand is the most confusing and miraculous object in the world. In nature, every appendage has a clear lethal purpose. A claw is for tearing, a beak is for crushing, a hoof is for striking, but a human hand can manipulate the physical world with a delicacy that is entirely alien to the wild. We are entity manipulators. We can untie knots. We can pull out splinters. We can unkill the things that have already started to die. Animals with large frontal lobes may be able to perceive this agency. They may see us not just as predators, but as fixers, beings that operate outside the standard laws of the food chain. We are the only creatures in history that have learned how to undo the damage that nature or we ourselves have caused. But this intelligence goes deeper than a single encounter. In the vast savannas of Kenya, wild elephants have been documented performing a behavior that defies every instinct of a wild herbivore. Elephants that have been shot by poachers or pierced by spears have walked for miles, bypassing closer water sources and familiar grazing grounds to stand directly outside human ranger stations. These are locations they usually avoid with extreme caution. But they don't just stand there, they wait. They wait for the humans with the medicine and the tools to emerge. This suggests a form of cultural learning, a memory of mercy that is passed down through generations. Elephants are long lived and deeply social. If one matriarch is helped by a human, she may encode that person or that location as a safe harbor in the landscape of fear. They aren't just looking for help, they are looking for a hospital. They have identified humans as the only species capable of providing a biological reset. Nature doesn't have a delete key for trauma. If you are a wild animal and you are broken, you stay broken until the predators find you. But humans represent a glitch in that system. We are the only creatures that can hit undo. While we marvel at the intelligence of whales and elephants, something more subtle is happening in our own backyards. We are physically sculpting the brains of the animals that live among us. This is the science of self-domestication. In urban and suburban environments, animals like foxes, squirrels, and coyotes are undergoing a biological shift. Research led by Brian Hare and others suggests that wildlife living in high human density areas is evolving reduced amygdalae, the part of the brain that processes fear. This isn't just getting used to us, though it is a structural change in the neural map. As these animals realize that humans provide a predator shield, a zone where the wolves and cougars are afraid to go, their baseline fear of us begins to shrink. In these fringe zones, the landscape of fear has been inverted. The human yard is now the green zone. This makes the leap from wild neighbor to emergency requester much shorter. A squirrel with a piece of plastic wrapped around its neck might approach you not because it loves you, but because the biological barrier that once made you a monster has been worn down by generations of living in your shadow. We are literally sculpting the biology of trust through our mere presence. They are interested in a sea lion that is currently shivering in the freezing dark water. The orcas are performing a carousel hunt, circling the sea lion, using their sonar to disorient it, preparing for the final, brutal strike. In that moment, the sea lion's brain is a storm of adrenaline and terror. To its left and right is a pod of 6-ton predators that specialize in tearing its kind apart. In front of it is a boat, an unnatural, loud, vibrating object filled with humans. Under any other circumstances, that boat would be a place of extreme danger. The sea lion would dive deep to stay away from it. But today, the geometry has changed. The boat is the only thing in the entire ocean that isn't an orca's tooth. The sea lion doesn't hesitate, it leaps. It hurls its 500-pound body out of the water and onto the narrow deck of the boat, nearly capsizing it. It huddles at the feet of the humans, gasping for air, its eyes wide and bloodshot. It refuses to leave. Even as the boat begins to move, even as the humans talk and move around it, the sea lion remains frozen. It isn't seeking a connection, it is using the human presence as a biological shield. It has calculated that the humans might kill it, but the orcas will kill it. In the math of survival, might is a luxury. This least deadly option isn't just about escaping predators, it's about escaping the breakdown of the body itself. This is where we encounter the pain-fear ratio. Every brain, whether it belongs to a human or a coyote, has a hierarchy of inputs. Fear is usually at the top. But acute, prolonged physical pain has a unique way of hijacking the nervous system. When an animal is suffering from a massive infection or a snare is slowly amputating its limb, the part of the brain that manages fear, the amygdala, begins to lose its dominance. The body's internal alarm system for pain becomes so loud that it drowns out the external alarm system for danger. This creates a state of cognitive collapse. The animal becomes exhausted. It enters a state of learned helplessness where the standard rules of the wild no longer apply. This is often when we see predators, foxes, wolves, even bears, behaving with a chilling, unnatural docility. They aren't tame, they are dimmed. The lights of their instinct have been turned down by the sheer weight of their agony. In the 1970s, in the remote, frozen reaches of the Chukotka Peninsula, a group of Soviet soldiers encountered this dimming in its most extreme form. A wild polar bear, the largest land predator on the planet, approached their outpost. It wasn't attacking, it wasn't roaring, it was sitting. The soldiers realized that the bear's tongue was trapped inside a jagged, discarded tin of condensed milk. The metal had sliced deep, and the cold had likely begun to fuse the metal to the flesh. The bear was starving, exhausted, and in a level of pain that is hard to imagine. It allowed a soldier to approach it with a pair of pliers. It didn't flinch. It didn't strike out. It sat with a terrifying, statuesque patience while the soldier worked the metal free. This is the geometry of desperation at its most profound. A creature that could kill a human with a single swipe of its paw recognized that its own strength was useless against this specific disaster. But why don't they go to other animals? Why doesn't a wounded deer, seek out a bear, or a sea lion seek out a whale? Because humans occupy a unique ecological niche. We are the only species that is unpredictable in our mercy. In the wild, mercy is non-existent. A wolf will never decide not to eat a wounded caribou because it feels bad. A shark will never free a turtle from a net. In the natural world, vulnerability is a dinner bell. It is an invitation to be consumed. Humans are different. We are the only creature on earth that might kill you, or might feed you, or might spend 3 hours cutting a net off your fin. We are the chaos factor in the laws of nature. Animals that have lived near us for generations, crows, elephants, foxes, have begun to sense this. They see our theory of mind in action. They see us using tools. They see us manipulating the environment in ways that no other animal can. When an animal is in trouble, it isn't seeking love in the way we think of it. It is seeking a mechanical miracle. It is looking for the only creature in the universe that has the power to break the death sentence of the natural world. They don't see us as friends. They see us as a break in the laws of physics. They see us as the only thing that can undo the permanent. As we move forward, we have to ask, how do they know we have this power? How does an animal look at a human hand and realize it is a tool for liberation rather than a weapon of destruction? To answer that, we have to look at the tool user signal and the startling way the wild has begun to review us as a species. But why do we respond? Why does a diver risk his life to cut a whale free? Why does a homeowner spend 3 hours trying to help a tangled bird? This is the other half of the bridge, the universal rescue drive. We are equipped with a mirror neuron system that allows us to feel the distress of another being as if it were our own. When we see a whale pinned by ropes, our own brains fire in a way that simulates the feeling of being trapped. Altruism, in this sense, is a biological leakage. It is a drive so strong that it crosses the species barrier. Interestingly, we aren't the only ones who do this. Humpback whales have been documented traveling for miles to interfere in orca hunts, not to save their own kind, but to save seals, sea lions, and other species from being eaten. Biologist Robert Pittman has recorded dozens of these instances. It appears that high-level empathy is a biological byproduct of complex social brains. We help because we can't help but feel. We have become the repair species for a world we broke, driven by a neural system that was designed to save our own children, but has accidentally expanded to encompass the entire living world. However, we must be careful not to fall into the anthropomorphic trap. Not every animal that approaches a human is asking for a miracle. We have to consider the cold, scientific reality of the exhaustion theory. Many legendary rescue stories may have a darker explanation. When an animal is at the absolute end of its physiological resources, when its heart is failing from stress or its muscles are catabolizing from hunger, the landscape of fear doesn't just glitch, it disappears. In these moments, the animal isn't choosing to trust you. It has simply lost the ability to care. Dr. David Meck, one of the world's leading wolf experts, has noted that many instances of wild animals approaching humans are actually just animals that are too sick or too tired to move. The thank you breach of the whale or the nudge of the dolphin might not be gratitude at all. It could be a post-stress physiological reset, a massive release of dopamine, and a reoxygenation of the blood after hours of restricted movement. We want to believe in the fairy tale of the grateful beast because it makes us feel like we belong to the world again. But the truth is often more clinical and, in a way, more profound. We are the only creatures in the landscape that an animal can surrender to without being immediately consumed. This leaves us with a heavy existential weight. For most of our history, we were just another predator, another red zone on the map. But as we have expanded and dominated every corner of the globe, we have unintentionally occupied the role of biological gods. We are the ones who create the traps, the plastic nets, the climate-induced droughts, the fragmentation of forests, and we are the only ones who can fix them. We are the only predators in history that have learned how to unkill. and the animals have noticed. Think back to that deer on your porch. It is a representative of a wild world that is increasingly out of options. When nature fails, when the old laws of predator and prey are no longer enough to ensure survival, the animals are looking to the anomaly. They are looking to us. We have become the stewards of a dying world, not because we are better, but because we are the only ones with the tools to hit undo. When the woods go silent as you walk through them, they aren't empty. They are waiting. They are waiting to see if the monster walking between the trees today is the one that kills or the one that fixes. The tragedy of the modern world is that for every animal that finds a human hand and is saved, 1,000 others are waiting in the dark for a miracle that will never come. We are the repair species. We have been given the hands of gods and the hearts of predators, and the rest of the living world is now forced to gamble its life on which one we decide to be in any given moment. The next time a wild animal watches you from the shadows, remember that it isn't just looking at you. It is looking for a glitch in the law of nature. It is looking for the only miracle it has left. As we continue to reshape the planet, the landscape of fear will continue to shift. Some animals will run further into the dark, and others will step closer to our porches. They will look at us with that unnerving, focused intensity, searching for the agency that only we possess. And the question that will haunt our species for the next 1,000 years is not whether we are smart enough to help, but whether we are kind enough to care before the miracles run out. The silence of the wild is a request. It's an open-ended question, and every time we reach out a hand to untie a knot or heal a wound, we are answering it. We are proving that even in a world governed by the red laws of tooth and claw, there is still room for a glitch. There is still room for us. The animal on your porch doesn't need to know your name. It doesn't need to understand your politics or your history. It only needs to know one thing, that for today, in this small patch of grass, the predator has decided to be a fixer. And in that one moment, the entire universe feels a little less lonely. Nature may not have a delete key for trauma. It may not have a way to undo the hooks and the ropes and the heat. But it has us, and for now, that has to be enough. We are the only creatures in the dark that can be surrendered to. We are the keepers of the unkill, and the wild is waiting for us to remember what that means. But while it's one thing for a squirrel or a fox to seek us out on land, it is something else entirely when it happens in the crushing depths of the ocean. In the blue, the distance between us and the wild is even greater. And yet, it is in the water that we find the most patient, most deliberate, and most intelligent pleas of all. As we move into the next chapter, we leave the world of the hand and enter the world of the eye. We are going to look at the giants of the deep, creatures with brains the size of basketballs, who have been known to wait for hours for a human to perform a single, life-saving mechanical miracle. To find the most profound examples of the interspecies plea, we have to leave the world of light and air and descend into a place where we are the ultimate aliens. In the ocean, the rules of biology are written in the language of pressure and silence. Here, we are fragile, bubbling intruders, dependent on tanks of compressed gas and rubber suits to survive even a few minutes. And yet, it is in this crushing blue abyss that we find a form of communication so deliberate, so patient, and so cognitively complex that it challenges everything we thought we knew about the wild. Imagine you are a scuba diver off the coast of Socorro Island. You are floating in a vast sapphire void when a shadow begins to blot out the sun. It is a giant manta ray, a creature with a wingspan of 20 feet, weighing nearly 2 tons. It moves with a prehistoric, bird-like grace, its massive cephalic fins unfurling like wings. Under normal circumstances, this would be a moment of awe-inspiring distance. But the ray isn't passing by. It stops. It descends until it is hovering just inches above your head. You look up and see it. A thick, braided fishing line is wrapped around its body, carving deep, bloody grooves into its shimmering white underbelly. The line has been there for months, perhaps years. With every flap of its wings, the nylon cinches tighter. The ray is being slowly bisected by human waste. It looks at you, not with the blank, glassy stare of a fish, but with a massive, dark eye that seems to be searching for something. It goes perfectly still. It stops swimming. In the ocean, to stop swimming is to risk sinking, but the ray is willing to drift into the depths if it means you can reach the line. This is the Leviathan's plea. It is a display of patience that should be impossible for a wild animal. For 10 minutes, the diver works. He has to swim hard to keep up with the drifting giant, his knife small and pathetic against the thick cord. He is inches away from a mouth large enough to swallow him, and a tail that could stun him with a single flick. But the ray doesn't flinch. It doesn't thrash. It understands that the tiny, bubbling creature with the magic fingers is performing a surgical miracle. This isn't an accident, this is an invitation. Why would a manta ray or a whale or a dolphin do this? The answer lies in the encephalization quotient, or the ratio of brain size to body mass. Creatures like manta rays and humpback whales possess some of the most complex neural machinery on the planet. In the brains of whales, we find something called spindle cells. For a long time, we thought these cells were unique to humans and great apes. They are the neurons associated with high-level social bonding, empathy, and the ability to read the emotions of others. When a whale looks at a human, it isn't seeing a biological threat. It is seeing a social actor. It is engaging its spindle cells to perform a cross-species audit of your intent. It is asking, are you a source of pain or a source of relief? In 2011, in the Sea of Cortez, a female humpback whale was found entangled in a spider web of heavy crab traps. She was anchored to the seafloor by hundreds of pounds of nylon and steel. She was drowning. When a team of divers arrived, they spent an hour cutting her free. They described the experience as eerie. The whale seemed to assist them, moving her body to give them better access to the ropes, keeping her massive tail, which could have crushed them instantly, perfectly still. When the last rope was cut, something happened that sparked a decade of scientific debate. The whale didn't dive for the deep, she stayed. For the next hour, she breached 40 times. She hurled her 40-ton body out of the water, crashing back down in a symphony of spray and thunder. She swam to each diver, nudging them gently, looking them in the eye. To the divers, it was an undeniable thank you. It was an outpouring of gratitude from a sentient being. But to the science governor in our minds, we must ask, is that true? Some biologists argue that this is post-traumatic recalibration. After being bound and weighted down for days, the whale's nervous system was in a state of sensory deprivation. When the ropes were gone, the breaching wasn't a thank you. It was a physical reset. She was testing her body, remapping her senses, and the breaches were a way to clear the phantom sensation of the ropes from her skin. But does the biological why matter as much as the how? Whether it's a neurochemical reset or a conscious expression of joy, the fact remains. The whale recognized that the humans were the agents of her liberation. She stayed in their presence when every instinct should have told her to flee to the safety of the dark. This Leviathan's plea reveals a terrifying truth about our role on this planet. We have filled the world with invisible death, lines, plastics, and sounds that animals cannot see or understand. We have created a world where the only way to survive a human invention is to find a human being. But how do they find us? In the vastness of the ocean or the sprawl of a city, how does a wild animal know which human to trust? How does it know that the person on the porch or the diver in the water is the safe version of our species? To answer that, we have to look at the knowledge chain, the invisible network of information that animals use to review us like a 1-star or 5-star rating on a global scale. We are being watched, and the wild is talking about us. You probably think that when you walk through a park or drive down a rural highway, you are an anonymous observer. You think the eyes watching you from the trees or the bushes see only a generic human, a blurred, upright shape that is best avoided. But you are wrong. In the world of the wild, you aren't a ghost. You are a data point. You are being rated in a biological ledger that spans neighborhoods, forests, and generations. For a long time, we assumed that wild animals lived in a permanent now, reacting only to the immediate stimuli of hunger or fear. We thought their memories were short and their social circles were small. But we are beginning to realize that the wild is filled with information cultures. Animals don't just learn from their own experiences, they learn from each other. They talk about us. They have a social media of the woods, the sky, and the sea, and your reputation is the most valuable currency they track. To understand the knowledge chain, we have to look at the work of Dr. John Marsluff at the University of Washington. In a now famous series of experiments, Marsluff and his team wore specific, dangerous masks. One was a caveman, another was a former U.S. vice president, while they trapped, banded, and released wild crows. They also wore neutral masks when they were simply walking around, doing nothing to bother the birds. The result was startling. The crows didn't just remember that a human had trapped them, they remembered the face. Years later, whenever anyone wore the dangerous mask on campus, the crows would scold them, a loud, rhythmic alarm call that attracted every other crow in the area. But here's the part that should haunt you. Crows that had never been trapped, birds that weren't even born when the experiment started, began scolding the mask. The parents had taught the children, The witnesses had told the neighbors. The review of that specific human face had been uploaded into the collective consciousness of the Seattle Crow population. They had created a generational map of danger zones and safe zones. This is how a wild animal knows which house to approach when it has a jar stuck on its head. It isn't a random choice. That fox or that squirrel has been watching you for months. It knows that you are the human who fills the bird feeder instead of the one who throws stones. It has heard from the local network that your porch is a place of low intensity threat. We see this in its most majestic and heartbreaking form with elephants. In 2012, a man named Lawrence Anthony, known as the Elephant Whisperer, passed away in South Africa. He had spent his life rescuing and rehabilitating rogue elephants that were slated to be shot. When he died, two separate herds of wild elephants, groups that he hadn't seen for over a year, began a slow, solemn march toward his house. They stood outside his home in a silent vigil for 2 days. There was no way for them to know he had died in the way we understand it. No one called them. No one signaled them. But the knowledge chain of elephants is vast and mysterious. They share information over miles using infrasonic rumbles that travel through the ground. They maintain a shared history of who the healers are. To those elephants, Lawrence Anthony wasn't just a person. He was a safe node in a world of violence. His house was a sanctuary marked on their mental maps of the continent. This knowledge chain changes everything. It means that when an animal seeks us out, it is often acting on a cultural recommendation. It is the result of a multi-generational audit of human behavior. If we are kind to one creature, we are effectively advertising our mercy to the entire ecosystem. We are building a brand of safety that the wild can tap into when the math of survival becomes impossible. But this raises a difficult question. If they are so good at reading us, why do they still fear us so much? Why is the default state of the world distance? The answer is that the knowledge chain is also a record of our crimes. For every Lawrence Anthony, there are 1,000 poachers. For every person who removes a jar from a fox's head, there are 1,000,000 who discard the plastic that traps them in the first place. The wild knows this. They track our inconsistency. They know that a human is a high variance agent, a creature capable of the most extreme cruelty and the most extreme compassion, often within the same hour. When a wild animal breaks the chain and approaches us, it is a sign that the local data has suggested we are the safe version. They have analyzed our gait, our voice, and our habits. They have watched us interact with our own kind and with other animals. They have decoded our biosemiotics, the subtle signals we send out without even knowing it. As we move into the next chapter, we are going to look at the gaze. We are going to explore the scientific hack that animals use to ensure that once they find us, we cannot say no. We're going to look at how a wild animal can trigger the same chemical explosion in your brain that a human baby does, and why that biological hack is their ultimate insurance policy. They aren't just asking for help, they are taking control of our nervous systems. Have you ever wondered why, when you see a wild animal in distress, your heart doesn't just beat faster, it aches? Why is it that you can watch 1,000 buildings collapse in an action movie without flinching, but the sight of a single deer with a tangled leg makes you feel a physical, crushing weight in your chest? It isn't just because you're a good person. It's because you are being hacked. You are the victim of a biological heist that has been millions of years in the making, and the weapon being used against you is the most powerful tool in the animal kingdom: the gaze. In the wild, eye contact is usually a declaration of war. If you stare at a gorilla, it's a challenge. If you stare at a wolf, it's a threat. Most animals have evolved eye spots or camouflage eyes specifically to avoid being noticed, because to be looked at is to be hunted. In the natural world, the gaze is a laser-guided targeting system. It is the precursor to the pounce. But when a wild animal is in trouble and seeks out a human, the rules of the gaze undergo a radical, unsettling transformation. It shifts from the predatory gaze to the diagnostic gaze. Consider the way a dog looks at you when it wants a treat. It tilts its head, it raises its eyebrow muscles that, interestingly, wild wolves do not even possess, and it makes sustained, soft eye contact. In 2015, a landmark study by Takefumi Nagasawa and his team at Azabu University in Japan revealed exactly what is happening in that moment. They found that when humans and dogs look into each other's eyes, both species experience a massive sudden spike in oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the cuddle hormone or the love hormone, but that's a simplification. In reality, it is the biological glue of the mammalian world. It is the chemical that bonds a mother to her newborn infant. It triggers a powerful ancient caregiving circuit in the human brain that makes it physically impossible to ignore a cry for help. The study found that this oxytocin loop is a positive feedback system. The dog looks at you, your oxytocin spikes, you feel a need to care for the dog, you pet the dog's oxytocin spikes, and the cycle continues. This is the biological foundation of the human-dog relationship. But here is the existential twist. Wild animals have figured out how to hack this loop. When that squirrel on your porch or that whale in the ocean looks you in the eye, they aren't just seeing you. They are sending a biosemiotic signal that bypasses your logic and goes straight to your limbic system. They are using their eyes to trigger your mammalian compassion circuit. This is biosemiotics, the study of how different species communicate through signs and signals. Even though we don't speak squirrel or fox, we both speak vulnerability. A wild animal in trouble will often widen its eyes, expose its throat, or hold its body in a state of induced docility. These are universal biological signals for, I am not a threat, I am a victim, you are the actor. There is a theory that humans are uniquely susceptible to this because we are hypersocial animals. Our brains are tuned to look for faces and to interpret the emotions behind them. This is why we see faces in the fronts of cars or in the craters of the moon. This face processing power is our greatest strength, but it is also our greatest weakness. When an animal is in pain, it doesn't just show the pain, it broadcasts it. It uses the uncanny valley, that feeling of seeing something non-human that behaves with human-like emotion, to trap us. When you look at a fox with its head in a jar and it looks back at you with those wide, searching eyes, your brain struggles to maintain the distinction between animal and person. You begin to project. You see your own fear, your own desperation reflected in that golden iris. And once you project, you are hooked. You will risk your own safety, you will spend your own money, and you will give up your own time to help that creature. Not because it's logical, but because your brain is telling you that you are looking at a suffering child. The wild has learned that the human caregiving instinct is a resource that can be harvested in times of crisis. But there is a darker side to this gaze hack. If animals can trigger our compassion, it means they are also reading our intent. They are performing a diagnostic audit of our souls. Researchers have found that many wild animals are experts at gaze following. If you look at an object, a crow or a chimpanzee will look at it too. They are checking to see what you are focused on. If you are focused on a weapon, they run. But if you are focused on them with a soft, non-threatening gaze, they realize that the caregiving circuit has been activated. This leads to the most unsettling realization of all. When you feel that deep, soul-stirring connection with a wild animal, you might not be having a spiritual moment. And you might be the subject of a very successful biological manipulation. You are being hired by the animal to perform a service that it cannot perform for itself. But why is the hiring becoming so frequent? Why are the glitches in nature happening at such an alarming rate that the wild is forced to hack our brains just to survive the afternoon? In the next chapter, we have to stop looking at the miracle and start looking at the crime. We are going to look into the moral mirror. We are going to find out why the reason they come to us for help is often because we are the ones who broke the world they were supposed to live in. They aren't just seeking a healer. They are returning the evidence of our guilt. There is a specific kind of dopamine rush we get when we watch a video of a human saving an animal. We feel a surge of pride in our species. We see ourselves as the heroes of the story, the benevolent protectors, the healers of the forest, the compassionate giants. But there is a shadow at the edge of that video, a question we usually choose to ignore. Why was the animal in trouble in the first place? If you look back at the most famous interspecies pleas of the last decade, you will notice a disturbing pattern. The fox with its head in a jar, the whale bound by crab traps, the sea turtle with a plastic straw in its nostril. These aren't natural disasters. These aren't the result of a lightning strike or a predator's failed hunt. They are the result of us. This is the moral mirror, the realization that when the wild comes to our door, it isn't seeking a miracle. It is returning the evidence of our own negligence. We have entered a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. For the first time in the 4 billion year history of the Earth, a single species is the dominant influence on the planet's climate, its chemistry, and its physical structure. We have paved the world, we have filled the sky with carbon, and we have saturated the deepest trenches of the ocean with synthetic materials that will not degrade for thousands of years. We have changed the very rules of existence. And for the animals living in the cracks of our civilization, the world has become a labyrinth of evolutionary traps. In 2018, a piece of footage emerged from the forest of Borneo that horrified the world. It showed a lone orangutan surrounded by a wasteland of stumps and scorched earth where a lush rainforest used to be. The animal wasn't running away. Instead, it was attempting to fight a massive yellow excavator. It swiped its long orange arms at the cold steel bucket of the machine, a futile, heartbreaking gesture against the engine of its own extinction. This is the most extreme form of the interspecies interaction. This orangutan wasn't asking for a handout, it was recognizing the source. It understood that the excavator was the physical manifestation of the power that was destroying its home. It looked at the machine, and by extension, the humans inside it, and recognized that we are the engineers of reality. In that moment, the orangutan wasn't acting as an animal, it was acting as a witness. When a wild animal seeks us out to remove a plastic ring from its neck, it is performing an act of unconscious accountability. It has encountered an object that does not exist in the natural world, a supernormal stimulus that its instincts cannot solve. The nylon line of a fishing net is thinner than a spiderweb, but stronger than a vine. A glass jar is as transparent as air, but as hard as stone. To an animal, these objects are glitches in the laws of physics. When they come to us to fix these glitches, they are acknowledging a dark truth. Only the creator of the mess can undo it. There is a terrifying circularity to the modern interspecies plea. We are the only ones who can stop the bleeding because we are the only ones who know how the knife works. We are the doctors at a hospital that we are also bombing. This creates a psychological phenomenon in humans called the God paradox. When we save that fox, we feel like gods of mercy, but we forget that we are also the gods of the jar. We enjoy the miracle of the rescue because it allows us to temporarily ignore the catastrophe of the presence. We focus on the one individual we save to avoid looking at the millions we are currently killing through habitat loss, pollution, and climate change. The interspecies gaze we discussed in the last chapter, the one that hacks our oxytocin, is also a mirror. When that whale looks you in the eye after you've cut away the nets, what is she actually seeing? Is she seeing a healer? Or is she seeing a member of the species that put the net there in the first place? There is a profound arrogance in our belief that the thank you breach is for us. Perhaps it's not for us at all. Perhaps it's a celebration of the fact that, for once, the gods of the glitch chose to be kind instead of indifferent. We have turned the wild into a managed state. There is no longer any such thing as pure nature. Every square inch of the planet is now under the shadow of the human hand. When animals seek us out, they are signaling that the flight distance is no longer a viable strategy. In a world where there is no place to hide from human impact, distance is a death sentence. The only way to survive the Anthropocene is to find a way to live within the human sphere of influence. This is the true break in the laws of physics. The wild as a concept is dying. In its place, we are creating a world of symbiotic dependence. We are becoming the life support system for a planet we have broken. And as the pleas for help become more frequent, as the knowledge chain among animals spreads the word that humans equals help, we are being forced into a role we never intended to play, the emergency services of the earth. The squirrel on your porch isn't just an animal anymore. It is a refugee. It is a survivor of a world that is being overwritten by our concrete and our plastic. When it looks at you, it isn't just asking for a nut or a favor. It is testing the boundaries of a new, frightening pact. In our final chapter, we have to look at the aftertaste of this realization. We have to ask, what happens to us when we become the only source of mercy on a planet of our own making? What happens to the human soul when we realize that every miracle we perform is just a small, localized apology for a global crime? We are about to enter the echo, the final reflection on the God gap, and the question that will linger long after this video ends. So, the squirrel eventually leaves your porch. The fox, freed from its glass prison, vanishes into the undergrowth with a single, fleeting glance back. The humpback whale dives into the sapphire dark, the scars of the ropes still fresh on her skin, but her movement now fluid and free. The encounter is over. You go back inside, you wash your hands, you scroll through the comments on the video you just posted. But something has changed. The silence in your house feels a little heavier. The coffee on your desk has gone cold. You are left with a lingering, metallic aftertaste of a realization you weren't prepared for. You have just stood in the God gap. You have occupied the space between a death sentence and a miracle. And while it felt good, while it felt like the most human thing you've ever done, there is a haunting question that refuses to leave the room. What does it mean for the world that we are the only ones left who can save it? For 4 billion years, life on Earth was governed by a brutal, beautiful autonomy. Species rose and fell, predators chased and prey escaped, all without a single manager to oversee the process. Nature was a closed loop. It was a system that fixed itself through the slow, grinding gears of natural selection. If an animal got sick, it died. If an animal got trapped, it perished. There was no emergency services. There was no outside agency. The wild was defined by its independence from any higher power. But today, that independence is gone. We have broken the loop. By filling the world with our glitch objects, the nets, the jars, the plastics, we have created a reality where natural logic is no longer enough to survive. We have turned the wild into a managed state. Every time we rescue an animal, we are essentially admitting that the wild can no longer take care of itself in the face of our presence. We have become the accidental gods of the planet. We didn't ask for this role. Most of us don't even want it. We are just a primate species that got very good at making tools and very bad at cleaning up after ourselves. And yet, here we are. We are the only creature on Earth capable of mercy on a planetary scale. We are the only ones who can choose to spend thousands of dollars to fly a team of experts across the world to untangle a single whale. We are the only ones who will stop traffic for 20 minutes to let a family of ducks cross a highway. This mercy is beautiful, but it is also a form of dominance. It is the ultimate expression of the Anthropocene. When an animal seeks us out, it is acknowledging that the flight distance, that ancient, sacred boundary of the wild, is no longer a viable strategy. The wild is surrendering. It is trading its autonomy for a chance to survive the afternoon. There is a disturbing theory in evolutionary biology called self-domestication. It suggests that as animals live closer to humans, they begin to undergo physical and psychological changes. Their brains get smaller, their fear response becomes duller, and they begin to look and act more like our pets. Think about the Belyaev fox experiments in Siberia, where researchers bred foxes for tameness. Within just a few generations, the foxes started to wag their tails and seek out human contact. And by seeking us out in their moments of trouble, wild animals might be entering a genetic trap. Every time we save an animal that was tame enough to approach us, we are selecting for that trait. We are inadvertently breeding a world of wild pets, creatures that are still nature, but a version of nature that is increasingly compatible with our mercy. We are domesticating the very idea of the wild. And what about that thank you? That final breach by the humpback whale, the 40 breaches in the Sea of Cortez? We want it to be gratitude. We need it to be gratitude. Because if it's gratitude, it means we are forgiven. It means that despite the plastic and the noise and the destruction, we are still the good guys. It means the pact is still intact. But what if it isn't gratitude? What if that breach is something much more unsettling? What if it's an audit? What if the whale is simply acknowledging that she now lives in a world where her life depends on the whim of a bubbling, two-legged creature with a knife? What if that look in the fox's eye isn't love, but recognition? Recognition that the laws of physics have been replaced by the laws of the human heart. That is a heavy burden to carry. To be the only source of mercy in a dying world means that every time we don't help, we are actively choosing death. Every time we walk past a squirrel or ignore the plastic on the beach, we are acting as the gods of indifference. Why we have built a world where our inaction is just as powerful as our action. Nature doesn't have a hospital. It only has us. As you sit on your porch and watch the world move through its cycles, remember that the flight distance is shrinking every day. The walls are coming down. The wild is no longer out there. It is here at your feet, looking up at you with a gaze that hacks your brain and breaks your heart. They don't see us as friends. They see us as a break in the laws of physics. They see us as the only thing in the universe that can choose to be kind when every law of nature says we should be cruel. Perhaps, in the end, that is our true purpose. Not to be the masters of the planet, but to be its glitch of mercy. To be the one species that can reach across the God gap and say, I know you are suffering, and even though I am the source of your pain, I will be the source of your relief. It is a fragile, broken, and beautiful pact. And it is the only thing standing between a world of nature and a world of trash. So, the next time a wild animal approaches you, when it breaks the rules of evolution just to stand in your presence, don't just reach for your camera. Stop, look into that diagnostic gaze, and ask yourself, if you were in their place, trapped in a world you didn't build, being strangled by a material you don't understand, who would you pray to? We are the answer to that prayer, and that is the most terrifying thing about being human.